foggy, dark window, Myrna like it used to be. You're the only one I've waited for all this time, Myrna Lee. We're together, you and me. Bring out the best in things, like a mama with her little kid, Myrna Lee, just like it used to be. And I knew when I saw that the rest of the crowd was scattered around in pieces, Myrna Lee, keep them away from me. Well, you're the only one I've waited for all this time, Myrna Lee. We're together, you and me.
Ooh, it got quiet. Hello, everybody. I'm so excited to be here with y'all tonight. Welcome to parents, alumni, friends of our community. I'm Coughlin Cooper, head of parent engagement and special events at GPS. On behalf of GPS's head of school, Megan Cover, and our board of trustees, our faculty and staff, I'd like to welcome you to an evening with David McGee. At this time, I'd also like to offer a warm welcome to Kent, David, Hudson, and Lo. Thank you so much. I think I see somebody else too. Is this Mary Hallie? So that's in a little baby. So yay! I'd like to ask you to silence your phones and refrain from videos and photos. We're live streaming tonight, and hope that you'll share the recording with your friends and your family. Tonight is a GPS Macaulay Coordinate Parent event, and we thank Macaulay for their continued partnership as we grow our coordinate programs for our students and our family. Please welcome Mr. Lee Burns, head of school for Macaulay, who will introduce our speaker.
Good evening. It gives me great pleasure to welcome David and Kent McGee here tonight. David, as you know, is a best-selling author, a highly sought-after speaker, and a recovery and well-being advisor. His most recent book, Dear William, a father's memoir of addiction, recovery, love, and loss, published last year, is a national bestseller. But to us here tonight, David is much more than an author and a speaker. He's one of us. David and his wife, Kent, and his whole family are part of our family, the Macaulay family and the GPS family. When their sons William and Hudson were students at Macaulay in the early 2000s, and when daughter Mary Haley was a student at GPS, the whole McGee family became a part of the Macaulay and GPS family, the great brotherhood and sisterhood of students, parents, alumni, and faculty that we call Macaulay and GPS. David and Kent and family, we're so honored and happy that you're with us tonight. David is a former newspaper publisher, the author of a dozen books on successful business brands, including, I must add, the Moon Pies and Chattanooga Baking Company, which are also part of the Macaulay and GPS family. He was a host of the David McGee Show on cable TV and radio, as well as a regular guest on CNBC. David and Kent are founders of the William McGee Institute for Student Wellbeing at the University of Mississippi. The institute is named for William, who died of an accidental drug overdose shortly after graduating from Ole Miss. In addition to that institute, they helped inspire and create the William McGee Center for Wellness Education at Ole Miss, which focuses on helping students on campus with alcohol and drug education support. David and Kent, we thank you for being here tonight and for sharing your powerful, love-filled story.
changed just since the pandemic. It's no longer on the street corner with friends primarily. It initiates through a myriad of apps on that device. We also know studies are telling us that there's a lot happening from a mental health realm with apps on this device. It's not all bad, right? I mean, we can have constant contact with our students, with one another, but there are studies that show that there are mental health issues showing up. And what we have to remember is, think about it, 2007, today's high school sophomore, junior, seniors, they are really the first generation going completely into this. So things have changed so fast. We're nearing the moment where we have to stop and think and realize studies show that the average junior in high school in America spends 9.5 hours on their smartphone. I say that, and not too long ago I had a parent come out in the back and say, I thought it was 22. Fair enough. But the studies show 9.5. And then you add in pressures that maybe we take for granted. Like young people tell me, when they get to college, they sometimes feel pressure because they can't quite picture how they can find the business success maybe that their parents have. They can't quite see the path and they feel some pressure about it. That's one thing. And there's a lot more we know. We know COVID did it. And that's where the CDC and the U.S. Surgeon General made some of the strongest statements that we've ever seen. Teens today are facing a mental health crisis. That's what the CDC said. And I read that study and I was stunned at how strong the language was, except I get to engage with students from all over the country. And what I hear from deans, students, leaders, other universities all over is the anecdotal evidence says that they're seeing more pressure, more stress among students than they've ever seen before. And they're trying in a fast world, how do we adapt to that? You know, that's why this conversation matters. Okay, here's one for you. This will not surprise you either, and a lot of it ties back into this advice. Teens today go to sleep on average 2 hours later than we do. I'm older than some of you, but than you did probably too. 2 hours. Think about that. 2 hours a day. I need a lot of sleep, so that really grabs my attention. But do you know one of the primary symptoms of sleep deprivation among teens? One of the top 3 is it often closely mimics ADHD symptoms, right? So this thing is happening, and they're just running through trying to keep up with everything, and sometimes those symptoms, ADHD mimic, depression, anxiety, those are all the top byproducts. But they have a lot more pressure on them, I think, than we even did when we were young. This one gets me, and I share this with high school students, the next one, because it really hits me in a tough spot, though I know it's true. But I share it with high school students to give them an idea of if they get to college and they face this, there's not something wrong with them. A very valid recent study revealed that 87% of college students feel very lonely at some point in their career. They can pledge a fraternity, they can pledge a sorority, surrounded by friends. But yet they feel very lonely. And, you know, that's natural. But like in this social media world, you can be surrounded by friends, but if you decided you were going to stand and study and you log on and you feel this world happening out there without you, you know, or you're away from home, you know, I try to tell all the college students, you're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. But what we have to do is have this conversation so that they just don't have some unrealistic expectations that it's just rah, rah, rah all the time, you know. So it's very important to know, and it's very important to have the discussion. Okay, here's one. I hope y'all are ready for this one. I have nothing to do with legal marijuana, not my game. I'm for whatever makes our students happier and healthier. That's what I'm for. And whatever the research reveals that to be in this subject, that's what I'm for. But right now, here's the conversation we have to have. Things have changed. Follow me. At the University of Mississippi, where I work, we have the National Center for Natural Product Research. When I was growing up as a child, we called it the marijuana field because it's one of the country's only legal marijuana fields. It's right over by the soccer stadium at Ole Miss. Been there for like 4 decades. It's still one of the only federal government marijuana fields. So because they were experts in THC, both studying it to find out benefits, we know there's some medicinal benefits, clearly. Late-stage cancer patients could keep food down. You know, there's others. But also studying the impact of THC and its potency. So because they were the experts in THC potency for nearly 4 decades, when law enforcement around the country would make drug busts, they will send samples from Texas, California, Illinois, Jackson, Mississippi, Chattanooga, to us at the center at Ole Miss, and they test it for potency. Follow me here. Bottom of that chart, bottom left-hand side. That says 1995. In 1995, the average potency of street marijuana in America was 4%. The ingredient that makes you high. In 1965, they didn't have the stats, but most federal government information suggests that the average THC potency was 2%. Okay? 2021, that number on the right hand, the average potency of street marijuana in America, 16%. That's a 400% increase. Now, there's also this fact. How it's often used today is through vaping and other means that takes it at 70 to 90% of that potency, which in 1985 wasn't the case. I'm often asked by parents and students, you get to speak to a whole lot of teens these days. Is there anything that surprises you? And I say, consistently, I'm always surprised when I speak with students how many of them, males in particular, come back to me off to the side or reach out on social media and go, oh my gosh, Mr. McGee, I feel so much better. I mean, I don't feel great, but I thought something was wrong with me. I am completely addicted to marijuana. I'm using it morning, noon, and night, and I've tried to quit, and I cannot. They don't understand that it's addictive, yet there's a study that just came out a month ago that said marijuana addiction and psychosis to marijuana among Americans and throughout the world is soaring. I see it consistently. It's probably the most striking substance thing that I see. It has just changed, but most parents are not aware. And frankly, I was not aware when I was a parent either. And I battled a lot of that with our college students, you know, because they didn't know. But things have changed. And it's not just marijuana. And there's a lot of hope and happiness here. So I don't want anybody to get too rattled. But we just have to talk about what we face out in the world. Okay, so everybody knows about Purdue Pharma and the rise of OxyContin, and America gets an opiate addiction and so forth. But at the same time, it doesn't get as much attention because if you get an opiate overdose too much, you can die. And that startles us and gets our attention. But we also had rapid expansion of drugs into the youth market, like Xanax, Adderall. I'm not talking doctor prescribed. I'm talking about misuse. Benzos, like Xanax, Adderall, Percocet. So those 3 drugs right there are some of the most abused on a college campus. Percocet, Adderall, Vyvanse. What happened is teens, because they were prescription pills, study shows that 2 out of 5 teens don't think that those pills misused are as dangerous as illegal drugs. Except here's the problem, and follow me here. The demand for those grew so large, and the supply tightened as people in healthcare realized what was happening, just like it did in OxyContin. The supply tightened. The drug lords who make money off of this figured out, like, oh, back in the day when those Gucci purses were red hot, some people figured out you could just knock them off and make a fake Gucci purse, and everybody's walking around with their purse. You couldn't even tell the difference, right? They thought, well, if the demand's this high for these other pills, why don't we just start making counterfeits? And they did. Where it got interesting and dangerous and where things have changed so drastically over the past 2 to 3 years is you have the rise of the counterfeit pill. But they're not very good. They look kind of like the real thing, enough to make people go, okay, I'll take them. But they're made with crude ingredients, from rat poison to whatever they can get their hands on. So they needed, the drug lords needed to get the demand up to be in business. So at the same time as America gets its opiate addiction, which the story you well know is fentanyl. And here's what the rise of fentanyl is about. Number one, it's synthetic, so you don't have to cultivate tens of hundreds of thousands of acres of poppies. Time, climate risk, labor. You can take a room the size of this rug I'm standing on, get precursors, the chemicals they get throughout the world that make synthetic fentanyl, put one person in a hazmat suit, and they just start mixing. It's hot and it's uncomfortable, but they're mixing. And in this room, they can make enough fentanyl for millions of pills over months. Millions. So they have all this cheap powder, so powerful, so addictive. And they got all these counterfeit pills. So just really since COVID, they started putting 2 and 2 together. If we take this fentanyl and just start dusting all these counterfeit pills, well, then we got them. And that's what's happening all across America. I think the statistics show now 80% of pills, and they're discussed as their prescription among those who buy them, but they're not. They're counterfeit, and most of those have fentanyl in them. So I'll give you 2 real-life examples. This past spring, I had a gentleman who lived in Arkansas, and his wife had read my book, Dear William. And he said, my wife said you battled an Adderall addiction, and I did. And she said, I should reach out to you. I said, well, tell me what's going on. Well, I started with a doctor, but then I wanted more, so I bought him on the street. I took 5 or 6 pills a day for a while. How many are you taking now? 15 to 18. And that's the problem. I'm going crazy, man. I said, I just need to stop you right there. You're taking counterfeit Adderall, and it's laced with fentanyl, and you have an opiate addiction. And that's why you can't get enough of these. And that's why you feel like you're losing it. And he got into treatment the next day, and he messaged me when he got out and said, how did you know? And what I wanted to say is, how did you not know? Because he's 25 years old, recent college graduate, played college football. His wife is a nurse. He's young. His wife's a nurse. He had no idea. Things have changed so fast. He had no idea. Another example, his family allows me to tell this story. A year and a half ago, I got a young man named Thomas into treatment. He was an Ole Miss student. He was struggling, and he's just precious. Reminded me so much of our William. And he says he was taking pills, Percocets. And I said, well, those aren't Percocets, so let's try not to call them Percocets. They're counterfeit. And he said, yes, sir, I know. He goes to treatment. He gets out. And, treatment and recovery is not this straight line. We want it to be, but it's a squiggly line, how you get to that top. And it's imperfect, but it's about the journey and moving up. And so Thomas was on that. And in his mind, he thought, I'm going to just try to see if I can use marijuana. The problem is, once he started buying marijuana again, he had a relationship with a drug dealer. And once that drug dealer had that relationship, how long do you think it is, knowing Thomas liked Percocets, how long before that drug dealer just started flooding his phone with, I've got Percocets? And of course, he did. And of course, he died of an accidental drug overdose this past April. And, it's not that the fentanyl itself just killed him instantly because of what he was taking every day. The drug dealers didn't want to kill him. They wanted him to keep taking these pills. It's just that I'm in this room, and I got my hazmat suit on, and I'm hot, and I'm burning up, and I'm ready to get out of there. And imagine if you were in here and no air conditioning and all these chemicals, and you're trying to bake even 600 cakes. You're going to get clumps of sugar and flour. And that's what happened. Thomas and 5 friends of his bought the same exact Percocet pills, they weren't Percocet, in Oxford on that spring day. It's just that only one of the pills had a clump of fentanyl. So that's how it happens. I mean, you could walk into a room in some places at a big party of young people, and there might be hundreds on fentanyl at the time, and some know it and some don't. But they're not all dropping dead because they don't have fatal doses in them, right? And death scares us. And death gets us, I watch particularly on a college campus. A young person dies, everybody is ready to have the conversation. But like our son William, when he struggled with substance misuse, I mean, he was the walking dead as a college junior. By the time he was a college junior, and that was just as heartbreaking to me. And so what I say is death should get our attention. And we miss those who die, and we'll miss them every day. But we should also come together just like this to be aware of the world and what some people who might be suffering from a disease need, which is support, care, treatment, right? So it's not just death, it's about the walking dead. It's about helping those whose joy has been taken by substances, and they didn't even want to do it. It's just something they deal with, right? So I'm going to give you a family application of this. And this won't take too long, but it's really important. And, it's not the easiest to sit up here and just put our family on display, and they're all here. They don't always join me on these, but this is special, so they're here. But it's easy to talk stronger marijuana, this, that. We got to put a family face on it, because this is now an issue that American families are facing like we've never seen before, And it doesn't live in this corner, and it doesn't live in that corner. It's every corner. It's everywhere. So here we are. That's the McGees. That's me in the middle. That's William on the upper right. There's Hudson on the upper left. My wife, Kent. And if you know her, I tell everybody, we are the same age. We started at Ole Miss as freshmen at the same time. She just looks a lot younger than I do. But we are the same age. And our daughter, Mary Hallie. One of my great joys, when Mary Hallie made the terpsichore at GPS, she's like, I hope I make it. And she did, and I got to sit out there and watch her dance on this stage. And so it's probably my first time to be back in this auditorium, and it's very special. There we are. That's my wife, Ken, and I. We met as Ole Miss freshmen by the swimming pool at the Sigma Nu house on the Ole Miss campus. Only fraternity house in America to have on-campus fraternity house to have a swimming pool. Only one. I met her by the pool. She was wearing a one-piece Bugs Bunny swimsuit. True story. Captivated me. We got married as seniors, as children. And we had this family, and all I wanted and we wanted was for our children to have it better than we had it. That's all we wanted. Same thing you want. That's why you make investments in schools. That's why you stand by your children. That's why you're here tonight. You just want better for your children. There's William in the middle school when he was in elementary school when we lived in Oxford. That's him with a violin. He was shy, anxious, so tender-hearted. There's Hudson in the middle and Mary Hallie. And, we're at Disney. We're just this family, and American family trying to find our way. My idea is I'll be Father of the Year. I coached them in every youth sports team they played. I counted up one time. It was more than 20, like 25. I taught a young adult Sunday school class. I was on the city council. I tucked them in so many nights. I love you. I'm here for you. And I'm in every bit of it, right? But I had my own struggles. I was adopted. And I didn't know who I was literally or figuratively, And I battled depression in those days. And I didn't really understand what that was. There wasn't a lot of talk about it. And I was a man. And as a man, I was just supposed to get out and work and earn and lead my family, I didn't understand that I could talk about what I faced or try to get help with it. And so I self-medicated, reaching for a drink every day at 5, and over some years that grew into another drink and another. And I just didn't really understand what happened. And I didn't understand that I succeeded in leading my children, so much so that my sons never took their eyes off of me, right? They never took their eyes off of me. So why would I think, they would do any differently than I did? Our children were, had such an amazing life. Camp Alpine every summer, Camp DeSoto, and Glenn and Carter, Brazil are here. That camp is like part of our family. It's just like Macaulay and GPS. It has so much to do with the fabric of who our children are. And that foundation, as you'll see as this story goes, had everything to do with who we are today and how we found healing. It matters. That investment in the right people in the right places matters. But we are also human, and we were a little bit in denial about what was happening in our family, that we were suffering. I was suffering from substance use disorder, and it was impacting my family. When we lived in Oxford and our children were students in Oxford Middle School, it shouldn't surprise anybody based on what I've told you that William had his first drink in 7th grade. We found that after he died in his journal where he'd written, and he used marijuana throughout his high school. And Hudson, his younger brother, 2 years younger, he's following his father and his brother. And, so he's self-medicating as well. And there's DNA hand-me-down and everything else. And my wife actually has some really good insight on that I'll let her share when she gets up here. But then our daughter, Mary Hallie, she's had enough. She's watching her dad suffer, and she's watching her brother suffer. So she's like, yeah, I can't go down that substance road. But it wasn't any treatment for that. It was like a decision we didn't really get to talk to her about. And so it was like the water in the balloon, It was like somebody squeezed that balloon, and that water all went over here. So she developed an eating disorder that she battled through. And our family, was really beginning to struggle. Somehow, I end up misusing Adderall and end up with an Adderall addiction. And I was always afraid of illegal drugs. But I told you things have changed. And I want to be very clear on one thing. Very clear on one thing. I'm not talking about prescribed Adderall under a doctor's care. I don't want any stigma here, and I don't want any parent or student thinking we're talking about misuse. We're talking about misuse. All drugs are created for good reason. They serve medical purposes and approved for good reason. We're talking about misuse. Doctor care, yes. Misuse, issues crop up. So that's what we're talking about. For me, it began under doctor care, but I misused them. And I was on so much Adderall that I hated how it felt at the end of the day when I had to come off of that. And so my alcohol use just soared. And over 18 months, my life as I knew it evaporated. And those who knew us then, you watched it. And people thought, oh, that cute family. Oh, I'm sure they didn't give us any chance. I don't think I gave us any chance. I'm ending up in divorce. That dream, all I wanted was this person. All I wanted was this family. But that's what substance misuse to that degree does. You will throw everything you love away. And that's what I did. But thankfully, by the grace of God, and those of you who read Dear William, you'll get the story. I'll spare it from you here, but partially from my son William and involvement driving across the country with him, and literally the grace of God helped me realize what I had done and what I was lost into, and I got back up on my feet, and I got rid of the Adderall, and I was able to push back against the alcohol, and I was able to start digging in on my marriage, and I did get my wife back, and I did get my marriage back, and we began a new life together, and a better life together. But my family, those problems took years in cultivation and development. So it's not like I could just flip a switch, bam, all of y'all be good now. Fix yourself. I mean, the damage had just run so deep, I always say it's like a house. You've been in a neighborhood and you've seen like the family move out of the house. And maybe for a while they're paying somebody to cut the grass. But there's moisture creeping in and things are happening. And if you go back in that house in a couple of years, it's just not the same. Nobody's lived there. Well, that's really where our children were. I had to go get myself back up on my feet, rebuild my career. I'm just trying to save myself. And it was hard communicating with my children at that time because so much damage had been done. So William goes to Ole Miss. He is amazing. Oh, William, he was in the honors college at Ole Miss making A's. At the same time, he was in the Croft Institute for International Studies, fluent in Spanish, making A's. He ran on the Ole Miss track team. Any of you know Mike Wood, Macaulay track coach? We love him. He's like our hero, the former Macaulay track coach, our hero of the world. He mentored William. Oh, my gosh. William ran the 400 hurdles in college, academic All-SEC, made it all the way to the SEC Outdoor Track and Field Championships in the 400 hurdles. And his leather jacket hangs in my closet today. But he self-medicated, and he got in over his head. And things had changed. And he was in the first college generation where these pills were everywhere. I remember one day seeing a Xanax pill fall out of his pocket, and I wasn't even alarmed. What? Huh? And I went on. I didn't understand the abuse that was taking place, that he needed help. That was a sign for help. But it wasn't William. Hudson looked up to his older brother so much, and while I'm back on my feet working in New York, I get a call. I come out of a meeting, and Hudson, 2 years younger than William, has gone to Ole Miss in the same fraternity as I was and William was. He's been found nearly dead at the Sigma Nu house by the swimming pool, steps away from where I met his mother 20-something years before, steps away. And his friends, so you see he's blue, he's not breathing, he's not got a heartbeat. They can't wait on the ambulance. They throw him in the back of a truck and speed to the hospital. And the doctor's calling us, and he's like, he came in essentially dead on arrival. We beat on his chest forever. William came in. He had to sit there and watch it. I think he's just sick because he knew that he'd helped lead his brother down a deadly path. He didn't mean to, but he was beginning to understand it. And they were able to get his heart restarted, and they put him on a ventilator. And they said, hurry up and get down here. You may have to pull the plug, And we were counting the days to pull the plug. He was in a coma for 2 days. And if any of you in this community know Lynn Teague, he was Hudson's longtime youth small group leader at Lookout Pres. Every year he had Hudson and a group of friends in there, and he did his work dutifully and faithfully. And he heard Hudson was in the hospital, and he came to his side in Oxford. And he's in there on that second day before he leaves. It's time for Lynn to go home, and he said, can I have some private time with Hudson? And he's in there with Hudson, and he says, Hudson, I love you. I have to go now. I love you. And Hudson raised his hand and said, you too. He woke up, and Lynn comes running out. He doesn't have brain damage. And so we were spared once again. And, Hudson today, let me just tell you, he's sitting right down here. And he's 11 years sober, got sober at the age of 20, and he's one of my heroes in the world. He's one of my role models. And we'll talk about what he did and what I did in this journey in a minute. But I always say, don't feel sorry for us. We are so happy. We have found joy beyond what we understood was possible in joy. Love with one another, our daughter-in-law Lo, our son-in-law Luke. I mean, we're working at it. Doesn't mean we're perfect, but we talk and try to, and we talk openly about this subject on a daily basis, practically. Our William, people say, is there anything you would do over? Well, there's a lot of things I would do over. One thing is we let it go too far. He graduated from Ole Miss. When Hudson woke up, we began to talk and understand the depth of our problem. And William graduated from Ole Miss, and he went and checked into treatment. And it went well, right? As it can. He had some failure and setbacks, and he stepped forward in another one. He began to find success. He had months of sobriety. But again, it's not always a straight line. It can be a squiggly line. And his was that. And on a Friday night, he was lonely, and a friend called him to go out. And it's hard being young and being lonely. And he agreed. In his mind, he thought he might, okay, I'll have a drink. And then his inhibitions were down, and he bought marijuana, and soon the night gets away, and I found him dead. Fortunately, I was with him the week before, and we made peace on so much. And he told me, I was about to write another book, and he said, this is the story. You need to tell our story. And I believe that was part of this calling and what this is about, you know. In our family, I know a lot of people thought it would break us, and I don't say this to brag, because it's faith that led us here. It's not about us. But it's about what I tell Lee Burns, I invested in this Macaulay education for my sons, and I kind of knew when I was struggling. I would always look at that honor, truth, duty. I feel like, in a way, that type thing helped save my life, because we just decided we would get down to the basics. Quit chasing things and just be with one another and live by these principles. And it changed our life. It gave us confidence to go get treatment when we needed it and not be ashamed of it. It works. And it works the earlier the better. The earlier the better. Counseling, treatment. That's why we do this. It's not fun to tell your family story up here, but it helps bring the stigma down so others can do the same thing. And in 2016, we moved back to Oxford by choice because we felt called to get on a college campus. Because in my mind, we needed to do more for helping our students for what they dealt with holistically. And state universities just weren't prepared to do that much. And you can see that's a happy couple right there, because we're back together and our family's back together. And in 2019, we opened the William McGee Center for Alcohol and Other Drug and Wellness Education on the Ole Miss campus. And it's so gratifying, but I have to tell you, we have a lot of work left to do. We got to get a lot better at it. A lot of these students that struggle in college, they are just like my children, just like me. That started back in middle school. They got 6-7 years sometimes of habits formed, and it's really hard to dethatch. Thankfully, the College Board of Mississippi also we just started a grassroots movement, and now it's spreading. That's why I'm here in Chattanooga. I've been up in New Jersey, I was down in Louisiana last week. They created the William McGee Institute for Student Well-Being. And at a research university like that, that means we get to go do external work. And I was asked at the university, well, what do you really want to do? I said, I want that. Put me in that institute. It just so happens to be named after my late son. And I have a lot of pride in that, but this is not about his legacy. He's gone. I cannot get him back. It's not about his legacy. It's about your children. It's about your children's friends. It's about your families and every other family in this country. It's time to think about asking them questions about how we meet our students where they are. It's not our decision. It's how do they communicate with us what they need. It's seeing them and hearing them. That's how we get through to them. It's about beginning a conversation, which is what we're doing here tonight. I will leave you as I bring my wife up here to pick up, and so she'll talk for just a few minutes, and then we'll engage with any questions. So we don't want to leave here with no questions. So somebody's going to have one. So be thinking. Some of you that I really know, I could lean on you if I have to. So I have a student toolbox, and I'm no researcher, but I'm a journalist. So as I fell in love with students and helping students the same way so many of the educators do in here and parents, I began to read all the research I could get my hands on. The problem is we have a lot of good research in America. The problem is it lives in silos all over the country. It's not a collective point of bringing it together. So that's one of the things I'm doing is a storyteller, and we're doing with the McGee Institute, is we're going to try to bring that information together. We know what leads to human joy. So when I go in schools, when I talk to your students tomorrow and the next day, I don't tell them don't do drugs. A student told me the other day, he's like, you never once said don't do drugs. I'm like, yeah, well, that's your choice. I'm going to talk to you about how you find and keep your joy, because they all want joy. They can't promise you what they won't do. They can promise you they want joy. And there are study after study after study that tell us what leads to joy and what takes your joy. We know. So it's about beginning that conversation with them, and beginning to communicate. And so these are a lot of the tools that I give them. Number one, and I'm not going through the list, but number one, delayed substance use or less substance use. Number one, studies are so clear that the longer it is delayed for a teen, and or if they've maybe experimented, the more days they have with a clear mind, so the more they just don't use, their chances of not having their joy taken later in life by substance go up exponentially. It's not even close. The studies on this are so clear, right? But I always say delayed or less, because you never want people, one of the worst things you can have as a young person, to have curiosity, try something, and then they feel shame, and then they are moving. Well, that's a good ticket to more. I tell college students, go play Frisbee with a clear mind. Every day you have a clear mind to learn to process emotions in this world. Use all those feelings God created us to allow. We have to feel a little bit of tension to be able to get to joy. It's just part of humanity, the human experience, right? So I tell them every day you have with a clear mind is an investment in yourself, literally into the friends you will have, the joy you will have, even the profession you will have. So I thank y'all so much. I will make a return in a minute to answer any questions. But any of you, if you have read Dear William, you know what I'm about to say. And if you have not read Dear William, you will find out soon. There is one actual true hero in this story, and it is the woman who stood strong with our family to keep it together and was not willing for it to break, who believed in second chances. My wife, Kent McGee. Microphone, they'll get you a microphone right there. You can stand there.
Thank you. I'll take a seat. Thank you all so much for being here. I know it's a weeknight and a work night and a school night for many people, but I just want to thank you for coming to hear our family's story. We've learned there's a lot of healing and connection that comes just from simply telling your story. And everybody in this room tonight, everybody in this auditorium has a story. That's for sure. We've found so much healing from telling ours, and there's also, though, so much healing and connection that comes just from listening to somebody else's story. Because as you listen to their story, yes, it's not your story exactly. Nobody has the same, but you probably see similarities, points here and there that you can identify with, and that just brings healing as well, and just builds feelings of empathy, and just learning about an issue, and maybe bringing empathy to an issue that you didn't know that much about. So that's part of why we have told our story. David has a memoir that came out about a year ago, so we've talked a lot about, he mostly has, but our family has since then. And part of why we tell our story, though, too, and why our family was behind him writing the book, because by telling the story, putting a face on it, is really the strongest tool that we can use to break the stigma of addiction. And we all have this idea of what an addict looks like, or somebody that suffers from substance use disorder, and it's usually somebody, you have that image like they're disheveled and maybe they struggle in school or even drop out or can't keep a job and on and on. And, it is often, very often, the exact opposite of that. It's your neighbor, it's our son, who you heard David describe, William. And so we had that idea because we didn't know, you don't know what you don't know. And, as he was in school and growing, at that age, he was excelling. And we thought, yes, we've, seen some smoke signs of some issues, maybe of regular substance use and But when you're performing at a high level, that's what the stigma does. It just keeps people out of getting treatment. It's a very treatable disease, addiction, substance use disorder. So that's why we try to help break that stigma, to get more people to get, just to talk. You know, our secrets keep us sick. I've been told, which I totally believe. And, you know, in this last year, as we've talked about our story a lot, the response that we've gotten, I've been really overwhelmed by the gratitude that people have by just saying thank you so much for just speaking up. I felt like I was totally alone. You know, our families struggled with this. My aunt, my uncle, our young person, and we kind of suffer in silence because you're afraid of the judgment. You know, so I've been overwhelmed by people that almost feel like they have a safe place to know, I need to talk to you about this, but they're just so thankful for just somebody opening the discussion. So that's part of why, you know, we do what we do. Things that I've learned, and David does most of the speaking about our story, but I do parent groups with him sometimes, you know, so a lot of times it's parent to parent. You know, people want to hear, like, what have you learned? And things that I've learned that I try to share, it's helpful for me, it has been helpful to think first, like, what addiction is not. Thinking of it that way, it is not a result of bad decisions. Sometimes it's easy to do that, which is almost like blaming the victim. Nobody chooses to be hooked onto a substance, you know. So therefore, you know, they think like this person went down that road. They made choices, you know, bad choices to try this or that, and then they ended up in a full-fledged addiction, and therefore, you know, that's blaming the victim. And also, there's an idea, which is, it's true to a degree, that addiction is a disease, right? We've all heard that. And so many people are fearful, parents are fearful because they have this picture of their family tree, right? And it's dotted all over on both sides with aunts, uncles, grandparents, you know, siblings that have suffered from some kind of addiction. And they feel like, I know this is a hereditary disease, they say, and I feel like my young person doesn't have a chance, you know. And research and studies show that there are genetic markers for addiction and a propensity to go that way, but the genetic markers, more than turning you into an addict, it makes a person more sensitive. This is what a lot of research shows, that you actually just have more sensitivity to pain, to your emotions, to any past traumas, or to the effects of substances on your body. You know, you have this tendency to then just very much connect with this feeling of self-soothing, you know. So a good example that I heard just describing that is like you take an acorn that you pick up from under an oak tree, right? And think, oh, this acorn is going to turn into an oak tree, right? It dropped off. It's like the seed of an oak tree. But if the conditions are not conducive for growth of that, it's not, that acorn is not necessarily going to turn into an oak tree. You put it in soil, keep continually pouring water over it, sit it out in the sun, there's a good chance might turn into an oak tree. But if you take away those conditions that cause that to flourish, it's not going to happen, right? So that's where knowledge is really helpful. And I know so many parents that we talk to afterwards, they just say, I'm terrified. I'm terrified of the toxic culture that our kids are coming up in. You know, you hear the statistics. You know, over 100,000 accidental overdoses in our country in 2021. 2022 is going to surpass that number. There's probably nobody in this auditorium that doesn't know someone now that has a family member, a friend, a neighbor down the street that has had an overdose in their family. So I know you're terrified, but knowing what addiction's not, but what it is a coping mechanism. You know, substance use disorder so often, most often, begins with a need to cope, a self-soothing mechanism, So our teens are, you've heard the CDC report, probably this came out in 2022. Our teen mental health is in a deep decline. There's a lot of mental health issues faced by our middle school, high school, and college students today. And, the easiest way for them to cope with that is to reach for a substance. It's pretty easily available, So, something that I've learned from, I think they say 4 out of 10 teens report feelings of persistent feelings of being sad and hopeless. So just keeping that in mind, as if you have a son or daughter that has repeated issues like flare-ups that you notice alcohol or suspect alcohol use, or some other drugs, alcohol or any other drug use. And you probably all have rules and things, boundaries for your home. But when those rules are broken, right, you probably do just what we did. It would be you're grounded. You're punished. We're taking away your car. You're not going out this weekend. Maybe we'll take the phone next time this happens. But just understanding the root is what I wish that we knew and practiced so much more when we were back in your shoes. There's a doctor that I follow. His name's Dr. Gabor Mate, and he is a physician and a child development expert and an expert on addiction. And he always asks, ask not why the addiction, but why the pain. Because at the root of every, person reaching for a substance is trying to soothe some kind of pain. So there, with the mental health issues of so many, the pressures on our teenagers, it's kind of a natural response that they're going to reach for the easiest things. So, I wish and I encourage you, if you have problems such as this, or just suspect those, feelings of pain and just maybe depression, or feeling inadequate, you feel like your teen is feeling those things, so just try to encourage them to talk to a counselor at school, or just an individual therapist, or get some kind of counseling so that they have and develop those tools to cope. When you're at that age and you feel depressed or not enough, that's a feeling that when you feel that, you feel like I'll feel this way forever. This is not going to go away. They don't understand. And I feel like a little bit that generation has lost the ability to realize emotions come and emotions go. Every one of them. The painful ones, the joyful ones, So that's where counseling is so beneficial and important. When we lived in Chattanooga, I developed a practice of yoga. I really fell in love with yoga here. It's a great yoga community. And it's been my lifeline through a lot of the hardships that David kind of goes over in his book that our family went through. But I've taken it to the next step after losing William. I teach yoga for addiction and recovery. And the last 3 years or so, I've taught in an inpatient drug and alcohol treatment center in Oxford. And it's been so insightful for me to be able to be a part of a lot of the therapy sessions that go on there. So those individuals are showing up in crisis. They're in full-fledged addiction, right? And so one question that's so insightful to me that's posed to them is, and I'm going to read you these answers, they ask them, what works about your addiction? Here you are, we're getting treatment. What works? What kept you tied to your addiction? And some of them say, to use a substance, to me, feels like a hug from someone you love. Another person said, it feels like when I used substances, it felt like a warm bath on a cold day. Someone else says, it made me feel normal and at peace for the first time in my life. So how can we fault somebody who all they're seeking is like a warm feeling in their belly? All they're seeking is just to want to feel normal, So bringing that bit of compassion and understanding I so wish that I had that when I was parenting our teenagers, you know? And one more thing that this Dr. Gabor Mate that I follow, he has a new book out, so he's had my ear a lot lately, but he said, just recently somebody said, so what is your advice to parents? You know all this information, the research, you've written multiple books. They said, what is your advice to parents? And he said, my advice is to first take care of yourself. He said, if your marriage has tension, is on the rocks, you feel it could be better, then go to marriage counseling. If you feel like individually you carry pain and resentment, maybe from a past divorce or from things from your childhood or some trauma in your past, big T trauma or little t trauma, do the work. Go get counseling, get help. And I know it's so easy when you in your shoes, we were there, and I know how much y'all pay for tuition. To say, like, that doesn't fit in my budget right now for me to go start doing therapy. It doesn't fit in our budget for me or our time. I know your time calendar, too, is crazy filled up because ours was there. I don't have the time. But, that's the best way that you can invest in your family and the biggest gift that you can give your children. Almost more so than this world-class education, these world-class facilities. Yes, that's going to change their life, but the way that you can do the most for your child is take care of yourself and your home. But thank you all so much for listening, and I'll give it back to you.
Okay, you hold the mic. Wow.
And hopefully y'all have some questions.
Okay, so it's a lot, but I think the key message, and it's a school night, as we say, and there's a big soccer game tomorrow. I've heard, very exciting. But as you can see, it's a heavy message, but there's just so much hope. I just see students, families finding and having so much joy, just like we've done, and it's just about the conversation. And that's why I'm so thankful to the schools. I'm so thankful for you guys. It's just about the conversation. So that's a great way just to lead into a few questions before we go home. Does anybody have one? Raise your hand. We might have a microphone to get to you.
Good evening. Thanks for coming and joining us. So we hear a lot about drug addiction and drug overdoses, but one thing that really makes me anxious and nervous as a parent is alcohol. And that level between what's a healthy use of alcohol and what becomes an unhealthy use of alcohol. And it doesn't seem that are as many resources out there to really talk about alcohol addiction as there seem to be. I mean, we see so much about the opioid addiction, but I don't feel like there's enough about alcohol. So I just wonder what you have to say about that, and from your family's history and from the research you've done and what you're seeing on college campuses, what you might say about that.
Yeah, great question. Alcohol, the 800-pound gorilla across America. Man, you ought to be me, a decade now, and like my son, right? And friends or family, or maybe even some of you, like walking this sober life. And everywhere is alcohol. Everywhere. Okay, so on a college campus, and when I speak of universities, I'm not trying to get ours off the hook of where I work. I just get on other college campuses and I engage with a lot of college students. So I speak pretty, anecdotally about a wider sample than just on the Ole Miss campus for sure. Alcohol is at the heart of, we don't see any go-get treatment that alcohol is not deeply embedded is a primary. None. There's these other things that it may open a door to. Typically, we don't see many students go for treatment who are just one thing, or adults. Nowadays, if people are going in, they're using 5 and 6 things. But alcohol is an anchor. It mixes potently and dangerously with painkillers. There's just this whole thing. Here's another thing on alcohol. On college campuses and among teens in general, binging, let's say 30 years ago, and I don't have the exact research by this, but my hand chart's going to be generally right. Binging in America among teens and college students 30 years ago, binge episodes in, say, a month, used to be this many. Now, binge episodes among teens and college students is this many. Staggering. There's so many ideas and thoughts on this. I encourage you to read on that. We all are going to have to figure this out. The problem with that binging is it's one of the primary times on college campuses sexual assaults happen. It's a primary time the next day that classes will be missed. And then once you miss a class, you develop shame, and you miss another class, or you may binge again. So there's economic harm, there's personal harm. The increase in binging, that's a question of the night. Because the increase in binging in America is creating a lot of harm a lot of those people will not go to treatment for substance use disorder. But it is very problematic and dangerous, particularly on college campuses. And we're seeing that. There's so much, a lot of a group of university presidents some years ago tried to push for a change in the drinking age. It's complicated. Mothers Against Drunk Driving did a very good job of helping lobbyists and others reduce drunk driving in America. You can see teens that you drink all the time that will not get in a car and start it. And we've really made progress. What I always tell people, that's it. Education works. They buckle a seatbelt, they won't drink and drive. It works. So let's extend it. I think there's a lot of fundamental questions. I live in a college community, and even students that don't even drink that much have a fake ID for alcohol. It's very troubling to me. So I have a lot of conflicted feelings about the drinking age, right? That I don't know the answer to because I don't have all the research to prove it out. We clearly have an alcohol problem. The culture romanticizes it so much that everything, I looked back at my family and the time when I quit drinking, everything I did with my family, I would pick a restaurant based on did they serve wine or not. I'm serious, and that's embarrassing, but I did it, and they watched me do it. Everything that we did fun as a family had that as a point. And once we stopped that, we began to find a lot of healing. So people ask me, and I'm sorry I answered so long, and I won't answer so long on other ones, I think. People ask me all the time, how do you feel about alcohol? I'm like, I don't have any feelings about it at all. I mean, it's a part of our culture, it's here. I'm not negative. Kent will drink a glass of wine sometime. But what I am is a realist. Our culture of young people and telling them this forbidden fruit. And they come at it hard, and social media permeates it. Social media is at the root of a lot of this. And that reminds me to say, on a slight segue, and then we'll move to the next question, I neglected to talk about the healing of our daughter, Mary Hallie, from her eating disorder, which certainly had some social media roots in it. There's no question. We began to understand, mostly because she got in our face, and she said, we were dusting at the problem. And she got in our face. Once we began to understand, certainly substance treatment, she got in our face and said, and she's not that kind of person, but she got in our face and said, I need you to hear me. This is as significant as what what everybody's dealing with on a substance end. I need help now. And we made an immediate decision to go in full throttle, and it changed everything. At one time, she had like 3 going, right? A therapist, a nutritionist, horse therapy. And so she's found real success in eating disorder recovery. It's very important for us to realize that all of this is linked together. That what I dealt with in substance use disorder was actually the exact same thing she dealt with. It just manifested differently. And we try so hard in our society to even separate those and put them all in their own room. I mean, you have to for treatment, right? But we have to understand societally, there's things just happening here, and a lot of them are rooted in the same place. Great question. Sorry for my long answer. Yes, sir.
When you're speaking to Macaulay and GPS tomorrow,
yes.
How will that communication differ than what we're hearing tonight?
It'll be fairly similar, but I will talk to them more throughout it about their joy. I'm telling you, whatever. I was off at, is there anybody that graduated from Baylor University in here? No Baylor University people? Well, if you have any friend that went to Baylor, we love Baylor. We went out there for 3 days this past spring. They invited us out, and we did parents programs. We met with students. Our whole family went. It was amazing. And I was getting a lot of school invitations. By that time, CBS had done some feature on us, and invitations were coming. I was getting good student response, but one of them said, I hear what you're talking about, and you keep talking about yourself and joy, and you're talking to students about joy. I think if you just more deliberately own that with them, that you're interested in their joy, because that's what you're saying. I said, that's all I'm saying. And I took that little bit and adjusted how I talked to them, and it changed everything. I mean, the next school I went into, students were lined up to see me. I was like, I'm just here to talk about your joy. That's all. And I'm going to show you some tools, just a few. And for you, some of you, they will be different, but how to get there. I kind of come back to that over and over again. The main message was them is they are not alone. Because statistically, even if they don't have anything in their brain that even takes to substances, statistically, by the time they're 20 years old, a very large percentage will experiment with some substances in America. A very large percentage. So it's about making them feel like they don't need to be ashamed. They don't need to be. So I don't go in and tell them what not to do. I go in and talk about them and how they find and keep their joy. And I find they really respond to that. But generally we'll go through the same slides, but that's the thing. So on that note, I'm often asked, is there anything we really should know? And it's so simple. And I wish we had done more of that. I really suffered as a parent during that time when I was trying so hard. When we get scared, we dig in harder. Fear is our worst enemy. I dug in harder, telling my children who they should be and what they should be and what they should do. I picked it for them. I tried to push them. And what I've learned is now I have wonderful relationships with so many students and young people, and I could get better at it, but I just ask them open-ended questions. If there's any magic of tonight, research shows over and over and over and over again, engage your young people in open-ended questions. Engage them in open-ended questions. Those answers will come, but if you ask them questions pointedly, they can't just answer you because they don't exactly know. An example of that, a young man kept demanding to me he had anxiety, and it was just that. And his mother said, I can't somebody's got to talk to him. I said, I'll see. We had lunch a month or two ago. It's just anxiety. I might smoke a little, drink some, but it's just anxiety. That's okay. And then we're talking a while, and we're getting nowhere. I was like, hey, you were going to call me Monday. Why didn't you call me? Oh, right. Okay, well, I'll just tell you, I was bombed. I got so smashed on Sunday night, I could not call you on Monday. Okay. How often do you get bombed? Just on the weekend. How do you define the weekend? Well, Thursday. Sometimes it's Wednesday, Sunday. And when does your anxiety start? Mondays I am. Because you hadn't been to class and you're feeling bad? Yes. And then he left like, I may have an alcohol problem. I said, well, that's for you to go find out. But of course. Yes, ma'am. You had a question back here.
I don't know where to begin. Can you hear me?
I can.
You're so correct when you say we're so fearful as parents in reference to our children. To me, it's generational dysfunction. It's where we were brought up saying we shouldn't do this, we shouldn't do that. There are two, as I've seen it, there are two core emotions. One is love and one is fear. And for the most part, we work from the standpoint of fear when it comes to our children. Not that we don't love them, but we are so fearful of things that will happen. I also followed Gabor Mate. My oldest daughter has done work with him. For those of you who do not know, my youngest daughter, went to school here and graduated in 1999. Was a great student, an excelling athlete, got a full scholarship to Boston University, married a young, upcoming oral surgeon, worked in this school even from 2016 to 2018, and died April the 18th of this year from complete liver and kidney failure because of alcoholism. So many people, myself included, was so afraid of what was going to happen. And in many ways, I felt that I wasn't the comfort that she needed in her last days. I'd give anything, and hopefully she's in a place now where she knows. But we need to teach our children that they're worthy. Whether they succeed in whatever they do or not, they are worthy. And that's really all I have to say. But I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
And thank you so very much for talking to everyone.
Well, I appreciated visiting with you early, and I'm so sorry for your loss.
I'm sorry for your
So
loss.
sorry.
And I'm sorry for yours,
Yeah, thank
too.
you. You hit on a good point. One thing we did, and our two other children here, I don't know how they would feel about this, but one thing when we lost William, we made a decision, we would give our children more love and less things. More love and less things, our two surviving children. And I'm not talking about education. I think if anything, the things that we believe investing in, that foundation from Kent to youth group to Macaulay, GPS, that's what saved them and gave them that strong core foundation to come back to. And Hudson, my son Hudson, tells me that all the time. And I've watched it. But I'm talking more love, less things. And that parent fear extends just beyond, when we talk about parent fear, it's not just about their safety. Our parent fear is, will they get left behind among peers? Will they get in the right social group in college? I had a young lady in real crisis some months ago at a university, and the parent meant well, but I was like, she needs to go to treatment, and I'm talking within the next 12 hours. I'm telling you, I don't throw this around, needs to go to treatment. The mother's amazing and meant well, but this is human fear. But can't she finish the semester? I feel like I don't know what I'm going to tell her grandmother. I don't know. It's just fear coming out, right? And the next day, the thinking had shifted. She needs help, and did. But it's just parental fear, and that fear manifests in so many ways. And as you read my book and as you hear our story, we were just buried in what's it going to look like if we leave school and go to treatment? What's it going to look like? We're worried about ourselves, not thinking we were worried about ourselves. One more question. I've gone on too long. I promised we'd have y'all out of here in an hour and a half. Anybody have one more question?
My question is just, you used the term substance use disorder.
Yes.
And I think we're all more familiar with substance abuse.
Yep.
Are they just different words or new words for the same thing? And if not, what's the difference?
Yeah, there are some new words for the same thing, but one thing I will tell you is this, and again, I'm not an addiction professional. I guess maybe I'm kind of becoming one. The hard way. I'm earning that degree the hard way. But so here's my lay person of explaining it. Number one, people increasingly, you didn't use the word addiction, but increasingly we don't like the word addiction, which, But I use substance misuse a lot, and one reason I do. So if you think about, people always want to put it in a box, like you're this or you're over here and it's fine. The truth is it's a spectrum, and there's a scale. And at the very top of that is addiction, as we know it, just full-blown substance use disorder. But I say substance misuse a lot because I deal in the college level with a whole lot of students that are down in here. And I don't know that they'll need to go to treatment, right? But misuse is causing them significant life harm. I mean, significant. And it's not that they can't quit, they're caught up in a culture. So they're lower on the scale, but I use the word misuse a lot because they're not suffering, they may not get diagnosed with substance use disorder. They're down here lower on the spectrum, but they are having significant life harm from it. So I will use that term a lot, of substance misuse. And that's just a lot of what I do, which is pulling the accordion a little bit, because I find a lot of the college students that I engage with that are down in this level, this one's the full-blown addiction ones are hard to get through because they're like me when I was there. I mean, you're pushing away everybody that's trying to get through. A lot of the students in here that are suffering from misuse and having a lot of life harm, they're sponges to this conversation, and they are so easy to just swing the pendulum back here. They're just waiting for it at college, and they're wanting to be part of a group where it's not as big a deal, and they're just looking for it. So I acutely pay attention to this group in here as well, not just addiction, full-blown. But that's why it's a spectrum. Okay, we thank y'all. I can't tell you how much we appreciate it. This has just been so incredible. We love GPS. We love McCallie. We love Chattanooga. It's just part of our family's life and such an important part. And we appreciate your warm welcome and this engaged conversation. Thank y'all so very much.